Think you know brutal executions? History books might have shown you French guillotines, English axes, or the fires of the Inquisition. But there's a file rarely opened. 7 names that defied caliphs, sultans, and emirs. 7 deaths that redefined what exemplary punishment meant in the Islamic world. People who dared to question absolute power, paying with methods that make the medieval breaking wheel seem merciful. Who were they? Why were their executions hidden from popular history? And why, even today, do archaeologists unearth evidence that makes scholars look away? Between the 8th and 16th centuries, from Cordoba to Baghdad, through Cairo and Isfahan, Muslim rulers crafted a catalog of terror, serving as a chilling example for entire dynasties. Every death calculated to break not just a body, but an idea. Every method chosen so the message would travel farther than silk caravans. If you value documented history like this, hit subscribe. It's the best way to support our work. Also, comment from which city you're listening. This script is thoroughly researched and factual, drawing on sources from Ibn Battuta and the Chronicles of Al-Tabari. Now, back to the story. Number 1, Al-Hallaj, 922. Baghdad, the Sufi mystic who dared to declare, "I am the truth," before Caliph al-Muqtadir. 10 years of imprisonment couldn't break his conviction. The religious establishment needed an example that would echo for generations. Al-Hallaj arrived in Baghdad in 895 as an ordinary weaver. He worked in the bazaar near the Tigris River, selling fabrics imported from Persia. But in his free hours, he studied mystical texts, practiced extreme fasts, and spent entire nights in silent prayer. Neighbors began to notice strange behaviors. First came the minor miracles, predicting rains 3 days in advance. Finding lost objects just by touching the forehead of the seeker, curing headaches with the laying on of hands. Small crowds formed around his weaving workshop. Whispers ran through the market corridors. In 905's eyes, Al-Hallaj publicly declared he had achieved mystical union with the divine. Ana al-Haq, I am the truth. A phrase that sounded like blasphemy to Orthodox ears. Truth was one of the 99 sacred names of Allah. No mortal could claim that identity. The trial lasted 3 years. Judges debated whether his words constituted heresy or merely exaggerated poetic language. Witnesses reported impossible events. Al-Hallaj multiplying loaves of bread, walking on hot coals, conversing with the dead. Others swore it was all trickery, cheap illusionism to impress the ignorant. March 27th, Baghdad's public square. 500 people gathered to witness the execution. First, his hands were severed. Al-Hallaj looked at the bloody stumps and smiled. My earthly hands are gone. Now only the divine hands remain. The crowd murmured in discomfort. Then his feet. Al-Hallaj continued reciting mystical verses as his blood ran into the hot sand. Cut off my earthly feet. My spiritual feet walk in the eternal garden. The crowd pressed closer when they began to gouge out his eyes. Even blinded, his voice did not falter. The executioner hesitated when it came to his tongue. Al-Hallaj opened his mouth willingly and smiled. Cut it. Allah will give me another, more beautiful. The Chronicles of Al-Tabari document that it took 327 blows to completely separate his head from his body, each blow counted by scribes who recorded the event for posterity. Between the 250th and 300th blows, witnesses reported that the decapitated body continued to move. Hands without arms tried to touch the face that was no longer there. Legs without feet twitched as if wanting to walk, a phenomenon modern doctors explain as post-mortem nervous spasms, but which at the time was interpreted as proof of demonic possession. They burned the still warm body, threw the ashes into the Tigris, but within 1 week, devotees began collecting sand from the square where Al-Hallaj died. They believed that grains of sand stained with his blood had healing powers. An illicit trade in sacred sand persisted for decades. Modern archaeologists have found burnt human remains on the riverbanks, dated to the 10th century Dars, with cut marks that correspond exactly to the descriptions in the Chronicles. Forensic analysis reveals injuries consistent with decapitation by a blunt axe, hundreds of small blows instead of one clean cut. His death created a fissure in Sufism that endures to this day. Martyr or heretic? The question still divides scholars in Baghdad. Number 2, Ibn Rushd, known to us as Averroes, 1195 à Cordoba. The philosopher who translated Aristotle and dared to say that reason and faith could coexist. Son of a respected family of judges, educated in the finest madrasas of Al-Andalus. He mastered Islamic law, medicine, astronomy, and Greek philosophy. Success that became his undoing. Ibn Rushd began as a judge in Seville at the age of 30. Simple cases, commercial disputes, inheritances, marital issues, but his ruling showed a dangerous Aristotelian influence. He used formal logic to interpret Islamic law. He argued that apparent contradictions in the Quran could be resolved through systematic rational analysis. In 1180, he penned The Incoherence of the Incoherence, refuting al-Ghazali point by point. He argued that philosophy and religion sought the same truth through different paths. Reason didn't contradict faith, it completed faith. The manuscript circulated secretly among intellectuals in Cordoba, Toledo, and Seville. Trouble began when his ideas reached the ears of al-Mansur, the Almohad caliph known for fanatical religious purity. Spies reported that Ibn Rushd taught young people to question literal interpretations of the Quran. Worse yet, he suggested that some verses were metaphorical, not historical. Caliph al-Mansur decided some ideas were too dangerous to breathe. He convened a council of Orthodox jurists in 1195. Unanimous verdict: Ibn Rushd was guilty of illicit innovation, doctrinal deviation, and corruption of young minds. Mandatory capital punishment. It was not a quick execution. First, all his books were burned in Cordoba's central square. 8 cartloads of manuscripts that had taken him 20 years to write. Parchments on Aristotle, commentaries on Plato, treatises on medicine, astronomy, jurisprudence. 2 decades of intellectual labor turned to ash. In 3 days, the smoke rose for 3 consecutive days. Neighbors reported that the smell of burning parchment reached the hills surrounding the city. Small children ran away when the wind blew smoke in their direction. Cats and dogs hid in alleyways. Even animals seemed to sense that something terrible was happening. Ibn Rushd was forced to watch, bound to an iron stake driven into the center of the square. Ropes on his wrists, ankles, and neck. A position calculated so he couldn't avert his gaze or close his eyes. For 72 consecutive hours, he watched his masterpieces turn to smoke while the crowd cheered its approval. When they were done with the books, they began with him. The executioner brought special pliers. Heated in embers until they glowed red, they tore out every single nail from his hands and feet with incandescent instruments. The smell of burning flesh mingled with the residual smoke from the parchments. "Where is your Greek logic now?" the executioner asked with each nail removed. Ibn Rushd responded by reciting passages from Aristotle in original Greek. Even with his hands bleeding and feet mutilated, his memory remained intact. He quoted texts by heart, translated philosophical concepts into Arabic, and explained syllogisms to the crowd that had come to watch him die. 14 hours of meticulous torture. Court records document that he remained conscious until the final 3 hours, when they finally pierced his eardrums with a red-hot iron. The method chosen, so his last hours would be in absolute silence, unable to hear his own philosophical citations. Death by exhaustion and blood loss. His body was found the next morning in a fetal position, hands covering where his ears had once been. A facial expression witnesses described as strangely serene, as if he had found final peace in the moments before death. They buried the body in a common grave outside the city walls. No headstone, no mark, no recognition, just another heretic dead to protect the purity of faith. But manuscripts survived, hidden in private libraries. Jewish and Christian families smuggled copies to Toledo, where translators converted his ideas into Latin. Subscribe if you want more documented history like this. Comment your city. His ideas reached medieval Europe through clandestine translations. The University of Paris debated his commentaries on Aristotle 50 years after his death. Thomas Aquinas quoted Ibn Rushd extensively, even while disagreeing with his conclusions. Ironically, the man they tried to erase from history became a bridge between 2 worlds. Cordoba today boasts a statue of him in the very square where his books were burned. Tourists snap smiling photos next to the bronze. Few know they tread on the spot where Al-Andalus's greatest philosopher spent his last moments contemplating the ashes of a lifetime dedicated to knowledge. The execution site is now a parking lot. Number 3, Al-Surawardi, 1191, Aleppo. The philosopher of illumination who challenged both Saladin and the Orthodox Sunnis. 27 years of age. A brilliant mind, Saladin feared more than entire crusader armies marching towards Jerusalem. Al-Surawardi was born in Persia. Studied in Isfahan and Baghdad before arriving in Aleppo in 1189. He carried rare manuscripts on ancient philosophy, Zoroastrian texts he'd acquired in Persian markets, translations of Platonic works that most Islamic scholars had never seen. His lectures in Aleppo drew crowds. Young people came from Damascus and Cairo just to hear him speak about divine light and intuitive knowledge. Al-Suhrawardi taught that truth didn't come solely through Quranic revelation or prophetic tradition. Direct illumination was possible through disciplined philosophical contemplation. A dangerous theory. It implied that individuals could achieve religious knowledge without the intermediation of ulama or caliphs. If anyone could receive divine illumination directly, why would they need established religious authorities? Why follow official interpretations of the Quran? Saladin controlled Aleppo through local governors, but kept spies in all madrasas and mosques. Reports arrived weekly about suspicious activities of teachers and preachers. Al-Suhrawardi's name appeared with increasing frequency in these intelligence documents. The Sultan offered a choice in December of 1190: renounce his theories on divine light and intuitive knowledge, or face a death that would serve as an example for future philosophers who dared to question established orthodoxy. Al-Suhrawardi chose his convictions without hesitation. A fatal error he knew he was making. They built a special cell in the Aleppo citadel specifically for him. Stone walls 5 feet thick, no windows, no light. The irony was intentional. The philosopher of light would die in absolute darkness. Engineers calculated dimensions to maximize claustrophobia and sensory disorientation. For 43 days, they fed him only moldy bread and foul water collected from contaminated cisterns, a ration calculated to sustain life without providing strength. Al-Suhrawardi constantly lost weight, but his mind remained clear. Guards heard him reciting philosophical texts aloud for hours. On the cell walls, he began to write, using small stones to scratch the rock. Fragments of his theories on illumination, scrawled in the dark using only touch. Modern excavations have found some of these inscriptions, words in Arabic and Persian about divine light, eternity, intuitive knowledge. But death did not come by starvation. On the 44th day, they introduced venomous snakes into the cell. 4 snakes collected from the mountains surrounding Aleppo, chosen for their aggression and potent venom. Al-Suhrawardi had to choose between slowly starving to death or risking the bites of the serpents for some food. Chronicles report that he managed to kill 3 snakes with his bare hands before succumbing to the venom of the 4th. He used loose stones from the wall to crush the snakes' heads, but the 4th bit him in the neck as he tried to reach pieces of bread thrown in by the guards. They found his body 2 days later, hands swollen from the venom, neck purple, eyes bulging, an expression of extreme pain frozen on his face, 3 dead snakes beside him, the 4th still alive, coiled around his right arm. Saladin ordered the body to be displayed for 1 week at the city's entrance. Thus die those who confuse philosophy with heresy, read the wooden plaque hung on the corpse's chest. Crowds passed daily to see the dead philosopher. Some threw stones at the body, others whispered prayers. Children hid behind their parents when they saw the face disfigured by venom. After 1 week of public display, they burned the body on a pyre outside the city walls. Ashes were scattered in the desert so no grave could become a pilgrimage site for his followers, a standard method for dealing with here.